take a short break. It's a 3-hour workshop, so thought we'd give you a chance to stretch your legs. Then we will have a presentation from Asia Jones-Martin, who's a land matcher with Young Agrarians for Vancouver Island and Gulf Islands. And then we'll have a talk from Virginie Lavallee-Picard, who is one of 2 food systems coordinators for the City of Victoria. And then finishing off with a question and answer period. So feel free to pop those questions into the chat. And before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the southern tip of Vancouver Island, where I am currently located, is the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples. I acknowledge and thank the Lekwungen people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations communities, for allowing us to live, work, and play on their traditional lands. Next, just some short housekeeping around Zoom. I'm sure many of us are familiar, although it might not seem like it at this point on our end. But yeah, just keeping yourself muted where possible. We have set aside time for Q&A. If we can open that up so you can unmute yourself, but for the time being, just pop those questions into the chat. If you have any tech issues, feel free to reach out to Ellie in the chat room and she will try to help you with that troubleshooting. Next up, quick thank you to our funders. This is a free workshop that wouldn't be possible without the Real Estate Foundation, BC Hydro, and the City of Victoria, who are also graciously joining us tonight. A little bit about FED. Some of you may or may not be familiar, so just a quick opportunity to talk about what we do. We are a nonprofit based in Victoria, inspiring food-focused communities and systems. We aim to connect people to the food that they eat, encouraging sustainable food systems as contributors to climate solutions. In our local area, we animate and green public spaces. We have delivered startup food growing kits and showcase sustainable restaurants. A little bit more specifically, these are some of our notable projects. We have something called the Urban Learning Garden located at the Greater Victoria Public Library. We've partnered with Life Cycles, another nonprofit here in Victoria, on this project with the goal of creating a free space for community to gather and learn about food, of course gathering when safe to do so. We also have member restaurants, which we certify through VIGBC, Vancouver Island Green Business Collective, which is one of our sister nonprofits. We want to showcase all the good work these establishments are doing in our area in terms of procurement and green business practices, and we currently have 12 members. We also have something called My Fed Farm, which we started last year as an emergency response to COVID-19, targeting those who were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So frontline workers, laid off workers, struggling families, people that were isolated. So with support from our community, of course, we were able to deliver over 500 startup food growing kits in the Greater Victoria area. And we are repeating this program again. So that is starting in May of this year. This brings us to one of our other projects, which ties into the workshop. This is something called Street to Sky. So this is what really pushed us to host this workshop today. The idea was to facilitate more food growing within our city limits. So Chris was a big part of this, as was Asia and the city, inventorying potential sites, carrying out interviews with landowners, developers, and strata groups, and also interviewing urban farmers to get their take on some barriers to growing in urban environments. What we found was there is certainly interest from the real estate side of things, but they did have clear expectations about what would allow them to enter arrangements with urban food growers. And on the other side, or the flip side of things, we had very few urban farmers who we could interview and contact. So we identified a big gap and a need for education around growing in urban environments. And here we are today with this workshop. And alongside with the Street to Sky project, we are creating 2 guides, one for landowners, developers, and strata groups, and another one for potential urban farmers. These guides will be available in the coming weeks. week to 2 weeks, hopefully. And I'll be sending these out to everyone that attended the workshop today. Excellent. And as we go, I just thought we could get started maybe with a poll question just to see where everybody's at. So I'll stop sharing and get in to the poll. Oh, and my poll's not ready. I'll skip that and wait till the end. I won't keep you waiting any longer. I'm going to pass it over to Chris, and he'll be teaching the bulk of the materials today.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Brianna. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. Can you guys all see that? Yeah, perfect. All right, T-Roo. Great. Yeah, well, thanks so much for being here tonight. Yeah, we truly appreciate you guys signing up for the seminar and taking the time to be here. This is the first time we put on a seminar like this that specifically focuses on this type of information. I've been working really hard over the last few weeks to try and consolidate the last 5 years of what we've been going through into this hour and 15 minutes, which is definitely easier said than done. There's going to be a lot of information. Obviously talking for an hour, but I'll try to be as open and candid and as engaging as possible. And really the goal is to give you as much information to hopefully help you on your own farming ventures. So yeah, like Brianna said, I'm Chris Hildreth. I'm the owner of TOPSOIL. We're an urban agriculture business which utilizes unused space by implementing productive farms. The produce is sold directly to the surrounding restaurants and the surrounding community. The whole idea and purpose for TOPSOIL is to kind of prove that you can grow food more sustainably in a city while creating a living for yourself and for your team. I really wanted to create and prove this model in this business so I could kind of pass on this information to more people, so more people could have the opportunity to grow food in their own community and create a living for themselves. And that's why I really like this quote from J.M. Fortier: we're trying to replace mass production with production by the masses. And to do that, I feel like it's my job to now pass on information so more people can be successful in their farming ventures. So this is going to be a general overview of what we're going to be talking about over the next little while here. Don't have much time, so I'll try and cram as much information in as possible. Yeah, there's going to be lots of information, so just bear with me. And if you have any questions, just write them down and we'll try and get to them at the end of the presentation. I always like to preface the presentations and kind of give you an overarching context of kind of where I'm coming at this from. So I consider myself a social entrepreneur, which is essentially, you know, we're looking at big systemic environmental or social problems and we're trying to solve them through business. Profitability is very important to us, but we base our business decisions by always putting people and planet before profit. So just to let you guys know, that's the context that I'm coming at it from. There are tons of ways to operate a farm. This seminar is going to really focus mainly on what we do at TOPSOIL and how we do it. I'm definitely not claiming like this is the only way to run or operate a farm. However, we have been through the last 5 seasons of operating a business and really trying to systematize and make things as efficient as possible. And I want to be able to show you guys exactly what we do and hopefully give you good information and some guidelines so you guys can be successful in your farming ventures as well. We're not going to be focusing on growing food in this seminar. That's kind of a whole separate seminar. The reason why we're not focusing on growing food, really, you know, from my experience, the actual growing of the food is almost the easiest part of the business, and it's what everyone focuses on when they want to get into farming, obviously, is how to grow food. But really, when you're looking at farming to create it as a business, you got to focus on, selling food and getting it to market and creating a financially sustainable farming operation, which is really the difficult part. It's the growing of the food is easy. It's how you get it to the market and that distribution process, which is really difficult. So that's what we're going to be focusing on, and just kind of the systems that we use to make that work. And finally, our model is 20,000 square feet, so it's half an acre. We've been developing this over the past 5 years, and it's what we're going to be discussing tonight. It can definitely be run by 1 or 2 farmers, meaning that you're pretty much the primary labor force and you're doing everything, managing the day-to-day operations, planting, harvesting, bookkeeping, doing all the deliveries. And that will make more sense when we talk about the economics of this system, because I think you really can create a living for yourself off half an acre with either you or a partner. Perfect. So people don't buy what you do, they buy, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I love this quote because it really resonates with me. You really got to understand why you're doing this and be able to articulate that to your customers. I've always said we're not selling produce, we're really selling the ability to be part of a better food system. And if you can sell your why, you can really differentiate yourself and have a competitive advantage over everyone else who is selling vegetables. So I want to let you guys know a little bit about my background and why I got into urban agriculture. I graduated from the University of Victoria in 2015 with a minor in business and a double major in environmental studies and sociology. So I really geared my entire academic career towards the pursuit of creating a sustainable business. I always thought it would be in alternative energy, but started to find myself gravitating towards food and food systems, as I saw in a lot of our environmental studies classes that food was a common theme that kept on coming up in a lot of the environmental, social, economic, health, and political problems that we were talking about. The last 2 years, while I was developing this idea, I specifically focused on the industrial food system in North America post-World War II, because for me, that's kind of when our current food system really takes off. America wins the war, gets to dictate how our global food system kind of unfolds. Fast food restaurants become the norm. Supermarkets start taking off. Women are emancipated from the kitchen because this throwaway living and preserved, packaged dinner idea starts to take hold. Home cooked meals and the transferring of food knowledge begins to decrease. Farmland becomes centralized, privatized, and mechanized to kind of feed these growing cities. And you have chemical warfare companies transitioning from warfare to creating pesticides, fertilizers, and herbicides and everything like that. So the last 80 years were, really crazy and interesting, but for me, it was important to kind of understand the historical process of how we got to this point if we were going to kind of move forward in a better way. Along with that research in university, that was kind of the micro scale of all these problems that I saw on a macro scale. On a micro scale, I started to go to all these grocery stores and literally look up the barcodes of all of the produce that we buy from Save-On or Walmart or whatever it is, and started to see that most of it was coming from really, really far away. A lot of it came from the same place in California. So I started to realize that, the food that we were eating is coming from really, really far away. It has tons of CO2 emissions associated with that food transportation to get onto our plate. It's grown in monocultures with fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. Most of it's wrapped up in one-time use plastic packaging, and it's all done out of sight, out of mind. So for me, when I was looking at this food system, I started to realize that we have a very efficient food system that can produce a lot of very sub-quality food for the masses, and has a system that essentially has negative consequences associated with it. From start to finish, produces a sub-quality product, and then has a ton of waste coming out of that system as well. So, this is really why I started TOPSOIL. I wanted to create a food production business that could scale and that had positive benefits associated with every single aspect of the system from start to finish, instead of negative consequences. And when you grow food in a city, you can really mitigate a lot of the problems that are associated with the industrial food system. like I said before, I consider myself a social entrepreneur. So the idea wasn't to just start a farm and grow vegetables and sell them. It was really looking at that big kind of systemic problem, which I saw was our food system. And I wanted to solve that through business. So really the idea is pretty simple. It's just do the exact opposite of what our current food system does. These are the 5 principles that I started with, and then I built my business around this. I didn't start the business and then come up with these principles. I really wanted to see if you could start with these principles and then build and scale a business from there. So the first principle was to provide chefs in the community with the highest quality, freshest, most nutritious produce possible, while creating economic, social, and environmental benefits for the building developers and the surrounding community. Number 2 was to minimize CO2 emissions associated with food transportation. When you're in an urban setting, you're so close to your customers. So the first year when we just had 1 restaurant, we were so close that we walked all of the produce. The second year we had 3 restaurants and got an electric bike. And now we have an electric car that actually does a lot of our deliveries. We use Moto, so that's really great. Don't have to buy it, we just rent it for deliveries. Number 3 was to use 0 chemical fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides. It's all organic principles. We're just using compost and organic amendments for our growing systems or our growing mediums, which is great. Number 4, we wanted to eliminate one-time use plastic packaging. So all the boxes that we deliver to restaurants, we pick up, wash, and reuse. A lot of the boxes that we're using in year 1, we're still using again in year, I guess 6 now. That's something as well that the chefs really enjoy about this, I guess, system is, you know, they get really fresh produce, but if you can imagine being a chef, getting all of this produce in from GFS and Cisco and all the big food distributors, all of it's coming in plastic boxes, which essentially plastic bags in plastic boxes. And if you don't have the systems in place to recycle them, they inevitably end up in the garbage, and the chefs don't want to do it, but they're super busy, and that's just kind of where it goes. So we've just eliminated that for them and given them a better product, which is something that they really like about this system. And then number 5 was to be insight in mind. We wanted to be transparent. We wanted to allow people the opportunity to reconnect with food production, to be able to see exactly who, how, and where their food's coming from. They can go eat a salad at Canoe and take a 10-minute walk across the bridge and shake the hand of the farmer that probably delivered that produce, you know, that day. It also, you know, urban agriculture and what we're doing when we're in site, it makes us accountable and responsible to the community that we are providing for. We're being watched 24/7, you know, by office buildings, by apartment buildings. We literally have thousands of people walking by our site every day, which means that we have to operate with the best intentions and the best practices. And if we don't, we're going to hear about it because you guys can see us, which is great. And I think that's something that we should promote and demand from all businesses, is that the business owners are accountable for what they're actually doing. So those are the 5 guiding principles that we started with in year 1. We were able to maintain those principles all the way up until now. We were able to create a financially viable business, and I just want to share with you guys kind of how we've done that throughout the years in this presentation. So our mission is to increase and promote local food production. Really straightforward, but that's exactly what we're trying to do. Our vision is to increase local food production in any community by providing a fully integrated modular farming system, which will empower people through education, production, and employment. I hope this presentation will inspire you guys and encourage you guys to look at agriculture as a viable job or career opportunity and accelerate the movement of replacing mass production with production by the masses. So I guess, yeah, we'll start with farm design. I like these 2 quotes that I put on the top here. Don't get too hung up on finding the perfect place. The idea is to find a place where you can get some production going so you can gain experience and income and build social equity in the neighborhood or city, which to me is, again, rings true. You just have to get going. Don't think about it too much. You're going to learn year after year after year. It's just really starting and getting it going, which is really the hard part and where everyone gets hung up, but you just got to do it. I always like to break our business down into kind of really easy digestible chunks, because again, for me, farming can be mentally super hard in terms of kind of all these big picture information and thinking, and the understanding of all these negative aspects of our current food system, and understanding the importance of creating a better food system. It can be really overwhelming and really daunting, because I mean, I don't know if you guys are like me, but for me, I want to try and solve all the problems all at once and just do everything. But when it comes to farming, for sure, or any business for that matter, making things as simple as possible is definitely the key to success. For us, we're always continuing to do more every year and grow as a business. But when it comes down to what we actually do on the farm, it's super simple. We transform vacant spaces, we grow high quality produce, and we get that produce to market. So this is what our current site looked like before we were there, and this is what it looks like now, which is really nice. So we can turn it super green. When I was designing our farm and developing the idea, I wanted it to be modular, scalable, and easily replicated. I chose container farming because it's cheaper than hydroponics and not as permanent as regular farming, obviously. We wanted to design it again so it could scale, it could go into more communities and be placed on any surface, kind of in any city or community. And it's really about trying to grow food on non-arable land in urban settings. So in terms of modularity, we wanted the system to be modular for a couple of reasons. One, we understand that cities are always changing and evolving. Land is super expensive in cities, and most of the land is eventually going to get developed. That's just kind of the reality of cities. So there's a ton of vacant land in cities, but we never know how long that land is really going to be vacant for. So the idea was to use that land when it's sitting idle and then be able to pack up the system and move when the developer needs it back. However, when we're on that land and we're occupying that land, we're building a relationship with the developer. We're providing social and environmental capital for them, and we're really trying to develop that relationship so we can kind of infiltrate their development plans so they can see us as an asset and not a liability, and they want to keep us around. So essentially, we want them to start seeing us as an amenity where they can offer that to their developments and their residents and people who are going to buy their apartments, kind of like a gym or a theater or a pool. Now we have an urban farm, we have the green space, we're employing people, and we're actually feeding the community that you're building in. So it was really nice where we are now. That's essentially what happened, and they want us there for quite a long time now, which is great. I think the modularity of the system really has been why we've been able to be successful, because it really mitigates a lot of the risk that the developer has to take on with a project like this. We've been able to essentially convince everyone that we've been working with to just let us try it. And if it doesn't work, if anything happens and they don't like it, they can have their, gravel pit back to the way it was. Which really is a nice thing to be able to kind of just get your foot in the door and just get started and just convince someone to let you try it. And because it's modular, we can implement it super quick and we can take it off. We started with year-to-year leases. Now we're looking at 5 to 10-year leases because people see the value in what we're doing. And again, once they need it, they know we can be off, and we know we can be off as well. In terms of scalability, the container model is great because you can start small. So if you convince a developer to, let you use their land, you don't need to do 20,000 square feet. You can start with 5,000 square feet and then move to 10,000 square feet. And all you got to do is kind of buy more containers and fill them up with soil, and there you go. So for us, we started with 400 square feet on a rooftop, and then we moved to 10,000 square feet on the ground at Dockside Green. The next year we moved to 15,000 square feet. And then for the last 3 years, we have been operating on 20,000 square feet in this site, this exact site here. And then finally, with the being able to be easily replicated. So the current site is 20,000 square feet. It's 3,000 containers, and the entire site can be set up and planted in less than a week, and it can be taken down in the same amount of time, if not quicker. All the infrastructure, excluding the soil, can fit into a 20-foot shipping container, which means now we have a farm essentially in a box that we can pack up and move to different sites, or we can create more of those farm boxes and actually replicate them on multiple sites. So that was how I designed and came up with the model, and that's what we're using it and why we're using it. So here's a list of everything, all the infrastructure and the tools that we currently use on our site. Obviously, you can see there's actually not that much stuff. You know, when you're starting out your farm, it really depends on, you know, how much experience you have and how much money you have to get started. So if you have a lot of money and a lot of experience, maybe you want to buy, you know, more infrastructure. For me, you know, we're always looking at the modularity of it. So we don't want to be spending tons of money on stuff that can't move. The two major things that were game changers for us was a refrigerator. We operated for the first, I guess, 5 years without a fridge on site. The first year we actually just harvested and went straight to the restaurant. So we used their fridge. You know, they ordered from us and we just went straight into their fridge. And then we found a fridge offsite, and now we have a fridge on site, and it's just made things a lot easier, I'll tell you that much. And then this greens harvester, if you're gonna get into small scale local food production, a greens harvester, which is this guy right here, is a must have. It's handheld, it's powered by a drill, it makes things super easy. What used to take 2 people, probably, you know, half an hour to 45 minutes to harvest a row of salad greens, this bad boy, one person can do the same amount in about 3 minutes. So it really is a game changer in terms of, you know, profitability and labor as well. So those are the infrastructure and tools. Super simple, super easy, nothing crazy there. So obviously when you're designing your farm, you just want to do it on a piece of paper. So this is exactly what our farm looks like. You're really just trying to make things as efficient as possible. You know, there's lots of things to consider, like sun exposure and the surrounding buildings, your high foot traffic areas, giving enough space between rows, and where your post-harvest station is going to go. But in terms of efficiency, our site layout, we have 7 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 there. Each block has 9 rows per plot. Each row is exactly the same. It's 50 containers, so 45 feet long and 3.5 feet wide. And the walkways in between are 1.5 feet. And each block is 45 feet long by 45 feet wide. The reason why I say this is because, again, we're looking at trying to make things as efficient as possible. And if you make all of the rows the exact same size, it's super important because it saves a lot of time and it saves a lot of money, as everything from that point forward can now be standardized to standardized lengths. So all your irrigation could be standardized, all your remay that you're going to be cutting, all your agriculture fabric, if you're going to be using it, etc., can all be standardized to those specific lengths. It also makes calculating your inputs and your productivity a lot easier because everything is just exactly the same, which we'll look at in the operations section in a bit here. It's definitely a basic farming practice, but designing your plots with standardized amount of rows per plot is super important because it allows you to now look at your farm not as this big kind of overwhelming operation, but just as small little pieces of small manageable pieces of a bigger operation. So each block is really easy to manage for us. Instead of saying we have 60 rows, we just have 7 blocks, and it's really a lot easier to manage. When you're designing it, like I said, you got to look at your high foot traffic areas. For us, this middle bit here is about 15 feet wide. And we did that because we wanted to be able to get a truck up and down this area. So when we're setting up the site, it's really easy for us to kind of start at this end and just move our way down. And if and when we need to take down that site, it's going to be just as easy to grab all those containers and kind of move them off site. It also allows us to kind of have wheelbarrows going up and down and lots of foot traffic going in and out of there. So that's why we did that. Our walkways, they're 1.5 feet wide, probably wider than most farms would have. But again, we wanted to make it easy for wheelbarrows to get down there so we can fill up all the rows with fresh compost as we need to. And then it also gives us a bit more room to kneel down and crouch and just make it a bit easier when we're harvesting. Kind of the last thing with setting up your farm design is this post-harvest area or post-harvest station. This is a really important area because this is where you're going to be spending a lot of your time. So you want it to be positioned in a place that makes sense for you. On 20,000 square feet, we put it here because this is where we enter and exit the site. So we just harvest everything and get it off site really easily. If this was an acre farm, this post-harvest station would be in the middle because we want it to be equidistant to all of our plots. So we're not having, so whatever plot you're at, you're not having to walk huge amounts of distance to be able to get to the post-harvest station, because essentially that's where you're putting all of your time and energy after the harvest is right there. And, you know, walking takes time and it's a lot of labor lugging things back and forth. So that's it's pretty basic for us in terms of the farm design. And, you know, when we set this up, we literally, roll out 15-foot agriculture fabric from one end to the other. We'll fill up all of the containers with soil and just start placing them in rows and into blocks. We'll set up the irrigation as you see here. The irrigation, each block has 2 irrigation heads that essentially does the entire block super easy. So again, the irrigation is set up super efficient and can cover all the blocks. That stuff super easy to set up, just PVC pipe. The good thing about urban agriculture is that there's lots of access to water and lots of access to high pressure water as well. We hook up to the city and it's amazing. We can essentially hit all of these irrigation heads. We can turn them all on all at once, and all of them will be, you know, shooting 35 feet in a 180 direction and pretty much can do the whole site all at once, which is really great. After that, we just plant the site and we're good to go. So we can do all of that farm setup in, like I said, probably less than a week. And then if we need to take it down, we can take it down as well. So that is how we design our farm and our farm site. Once you have the farm design and the farm kind of set up, obviously you want to try and build a team to manage that site. And then you want to figure out what tasks you want to manage on a daily basis and a weekly basis. So yeah, as I mentioned, this farm can definitely be run by 2 full-time partners. I'm running it a bit different and have been for the past 30 years because I'm working on the business and not in the business. I'm really trying to create these systems that can run without me, because if we're going to scale the business or give away this information, we need to create systems that don't just run with me or work when I'm there. So for us, Ashley, she is absolutely amazing, director of operations. She runs all of the day-to-day stuff with 2 team members, and then we also have a co-op student that helps us out during the year as well. Co-op students are great because, you know, the term runs from May to September, which is exactly when you need them. They're super eager, you know, they want to learn, they bring excitement, they bring energy. And also they go back to school, so you don't have to feel too bad, obviously, because we're a seasonal business, laying people off in the winter. They'll just go back to school, which is awesome. They also, you can get wage subsidies for them. So it's nice to be able to pay them, a fair wage and know that you can get some of that back after the season's done, which is awesome. And then, yeah, just so you guys know, I mean, we pay all of our first-time seasonal workers minimum of $17 an hour, which I think is fair, especially for a small business, small farming business, that's for sure. But it's really important for us to, to pay people fair wages when they're down there. And the reason why that's important to me is because, we really want to build a team. We don't want to hire workers or laborers. We want people to be down there and want to be down there and understand why we're doing what we're doing and want to be a part of that. So there's a bunch of ways to hire people. The way that we do it is that everyone starts as a volunteer, and that is not to get free labor. It's just so we have the opportunity, so both parties, both of us can see if Topsoil is the right fit. For the first 5 years, we had the same people. All of them started as volunteers, and it was just so easy. Like I said, we're not hiring workers. We want to build a team, that works together for that common goal. And, people starting out as volunteers, it allows me at least to see that they're willing to show initiative and really do want to be down there. Because if you're willing to volunteer your own time to come down and help, it makes it just so much easier when you're part of the team, because we already know that you want to be there and you support what we're doing. And it just makes life just so much easier. When you're hiring, obviously you're trying to create culture, a certain culture and mentality. Obviously that's going to be different for everyone, but for us, again, it's all about work-life balance. We want people to want to be down there, and we want people to really feel proud about, what they're doing, and why we're doing what we're doing. I always tell everyone that, honesty and communication is the most important thing for me. As long as we're honest with each other, everything will be good. I remember there was one guy who actually asked if he could have a half day because he went out the night before and was feeling a little bit hungover. And he was such a great guy and such a great worker. And I just appreciated so much that he was honest and didn't say he was sick or make up a different excuse. He was just straight up. He was honest with me, that I said, hey, Scott, you can have the whole day off just because I really appreciate your honesty, because you could have said a bunch of other stuff, but you were straight with me and I really appreciated that. So again, for me, my job is just to kind of make sure everyone has everything that need to succeed, and are really enjoying their work and want to be down there. And I think, again, if you start with honesty and communication, you can't really go wrong. We also let everyone know that their input is super valuable. We want people to feel like they can be, they can be heard, because for us, having, a couple of new co-op students come in with a bit of energy and a different eye, even if it's their first year, if they can figure out a way to make what we're doing easier and more efficient, I would 100% incorporate that into the business. And again, you're kind of giving people more responsibility and accountability to kind of want to be there and work hard for the team, and not just for the business or to get hours or whatever. And the final thing about having a solid team, if you can kind of go through that process, which I've been lucky enough to have, and just have such amazing people working for us, it really, allows you to not micromanage at all. I'm the type of person that doesn't want to micromanage, but if you can build that solid team with that honesty and communication, and they want to be there, it just makes everyone's life so much easier, because now we're all working for each other, and this kind of common goal of trying to create a better food system, which is really exciting, and kind of it's exciting when you have that team surrounding you, for sure. So that's how I do it, and I hope that's somewhat helpful for you guys. So you've built your team, and now you have to figure out what you need to manage. Again, farming can be overwhelming. And you can think about it to make it super, super complicated. But again, like I said, I like to kind of break things up into digestible bites to keep things as simple as possible. It becomes kind of, exponentially easier and less stressful when you can kind of break things down into these manageable pieces. So for me, these are the top 5 areas that we focus on 100%. It's really where we spend all of our attention. When you're running a profitable farm, or you're trying to make a financially viable farming operation, you don't want to be spending your time doing tasks that aren't generating revenue for you, because then what you're going to be doing is just spending countless hours, not unnecessarily, and making your day super long and less enjoyable, I think. So definitely you got to put a time limit on your workday, and you have to get everything done in that time frame. The massive benefit to urban agriculture and farming in containers is that there is no weeding. We don't have any weeds. There's no weeds blowing in from other places. We start with really good, high quality weedless compost. We can put all our irrigation on timers. So the two massive, big labor aspects of farming, which is weeding and watering, are essentially non-existent for our system, which is really great. So we can really just focus on these 5 things here and make our days, nice and short, and just get in and get out when we need to get things done. And we don't have to be spending 12 hours and 14 hours a day. It's 6 to 8 hours max every day. This is what, managing those kind of 5 aspects looks like on a weekly basis. So on Sunday, we'll email the chefs to get their orders in. This takes a couple of hours, not a big deal. I do that. Sunday and Mondays, everyone always gets off. Tuesday, we have a staff meeting, just go straight into harvesting, and then run the market at night. We'll do the deliveries on Wednesdays and Fridays. And then, as you can see, the rest of the week is pretty easy. We're running the market every day. We're doing some prepping and some planting, some harvesting, and that's literally what our week looked like. So just trying to keep things super simple and super efficient, and just do things that we need to do to make the business successful. So I wanted to run through exactly what we do on a daily and weekly basis in terms of how we record everything and keep everything organized, because I think this is something that definitely gets lost in farming. When I was starting this business, and I was going around and talking with farmers, it was really astonishing how many farmers I talked with, when I would ask them, how much they sold of tomatoes or greens, or what their input costs were, or any of that kind of information. A lot of them just said, I don't know. We don't keep track of that. And that's understandable for sure, because you're just so busy throughout the season. And if you don't have, really easy systems of the ways of keeping track of all that stuff, it just gets too overwhelming. So I want to show you exactly what we do in terms of record keeping, and I want to show you why we keep track of all this data, so we can kind of plan for the future, and we get a snapshot of our farm, and just everything across the board, and just to make it super easy. And hopefully this will help you, or this section will help you, because I definitely have gone through having 50 different Excel sheets because I was obsessed with keeping track of everything, but I didn't really know what I should be keeping track of, and I didn't know why I needed to keep track of any of this data, and it was just super overwhelming. So now we have 2 Excel sheets and 2 whiteboards down at the site, and that's all we do. That's all the information that we need to be able to plan for the future and see exactly what's happening at our site. So I will run through this. Hopefully it's clear to you guys. I will make it, I'll try and make it as clear as possible. So in terms of production, that's what we're going to be focusing on, just whiteboards and Google Sheets. I haven't found a program that makes it super easy to track the actual production from your farm. There are programs out there, but in terms of making it super easy, I just think anyone can make two Excel sheets, and anyone can get a whiteboard. And I don't know how much easier it can get than that. Our on-site market, we use Square. So there obviously is a program, and it's awesome to do everything in terms of all your revenue and all your sales through your market. It has, it can take tap, it can take debit cards, credit cards, all that kind of stuff. And then it consolidates all that information into its program. So I don't need to reinvent the wheel. They are already doing that and make it super easy. And then for the accounting, we're using QuickBooks. Again, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. They have done everything. You can put all of your numbers in there, do all your invoicing. It can create all your balance sheets, all your income statements. It does, does all your taxes, labor, all that kind of stuff. So, these two systems are already there. We're making those. The production is where we're not funding any programs. And I want to show you exactly what we do. So hopefully you guys can keep track of this as well. So this is the first Google Sheet that we use. It's our main Google Sheet. It's super easy. It takes whatever 5 minutes to just create something like this on Excel. It's got four main jobs. This sheet is to input all the restaurant orders, which goes in this first column here. It's making sure that the order number and the harvest number, which is the second column here, match. It's our delivery checklist, so we can see what restaurants are getting what on each day. And then finally, we create our invoices from this as well. And I'm going to go ahead and break that all down for you. So this is, exactly what we do. We get the emails from the chefs with their orders, usually on Sunday. As soon as I get that email, I will input their name, so the restaurant name here, and I will input in the first column here what they ordered. So let's say 20 pounds of greens, that's what they ordered. That happens on Sunday, so usually by Tuesday, the first column in this, in here and in Friday's delivery should be populated for Tuesday. So all the first columns are all done with all the restaurants. This is our whiteboard on site. So you can see it's super similar to the Google Sheet. It's Ashley's job at the beginning of the day to write down all the numbers from the Google Doc into the first column here on the whiteboard. This way, everyone who's working that day can super clearly see what has been ordered and what needs to be harvested. The reason why we use a whiteboard here is because it's just so much easier to write things down on a whiteboard instead of taking out your phone every time you need to input a number with dirty hands and getting your phone all dirty. This way, at the end of the day, Ashley, our production manager, just brings out her phone once and she inputs the numbers. So that's why we use a whiteboard and a Google Sheet instead of actually just inputting them on the phone. It just makes it a lot easier. It also makes it easier for everyone to be able to just input those numbers when it's done, right? So Ashley doesn't have to be there to start inputting everything. Once it's done, anyone can write in those numbers on the whiteboard here. So typically what we do is we'll just spend the day, once that first column is all filled out, we'll spend the day harvesting and washing greens. It's pretty enjoyable. We'll turn on music and just enjoy the sun, which is really great. Once it's all washed, we'll pack them into totes that correspond to the restaurant orders. So again, if Fernwood ordered 20 pounds, we'd pack up 20 pounds into totes and we'd write 20 in this second column. So it's super easy. We know it's done. Everyone knows it's done, and there you go. At the end of the day, Ashley will take this second column here, which is now being filled out, and it's all the same as the order numbers. And she will fill out the second column here on the Google Sheet. So again, she's only bringing out her phone twice in one day. One at the beginning of the day to write down the order numbers, and then once at the end of the day to write in what has been harvested. which I think is just super easy. So now this whole thing is populated. It has what the restaurant ordered from us, what we harvested for them. It has our delivery schedule. So again, whoever's doing the deliveries can easily just look at this sheet, look at what restaurants need to get delivered to, and look up what they need to get from the fridge to deliver that to that restaurant. And then at the end of the week, I look at this Google sheet without even talking with Ash because I know it's being populated correctly, and I'll just create the invoices from all of these second columns. So it does a lot of stuff, and it just makes it really easy. Everything is all consolidated into one Google sheet just by having one whiteboard down at the site, and everyone knows exactly what's going on. And there's not much communication having to be had amongst the group, which is great. I don't need to be emailing people back and forth saying, hey, what about this and what about that? Everyone's on the same page by just filling out that whiteboard and then putting it into this one Google sheet. So this is the second whiteboard that we have down at our site. Obviously, you can see it's the exact same as our farm design. This whiteboard and the next Google sheet that I'll show you is really important for crop planning and looking forward to the next season, because you want to be able to figure out how you can easily keep track of what is actually coming off of your farm, like what you're producing and what each row is producing and what each block is producing. You want to see what did well and what didn't do well, because you want to keep what works and you want to get rid of what doesn't work, obviously. And you can only do that if you keep track of that information on a seasonal basis to be able to move forward and grow your business and make it easier for yourself. So I'll talk you through a typical harvest day. You know, we get down to the site, we set up the post-harvest station, which really isn't anything special. You know, it's 2 10x10 tents that you can get from Home Hardware, a couple of folding tables. We'll fill up a washing bin with water, get a scale and a salad spinner. And that's pretty much it. And then we just start harvesting. When we finish harvesting from any particular row, so let's say here, this is block 1, row 1. If someone was harvesting this row and got, you know, they took their tote to the post-harvest station, they'd put it on the scale, and let's say it said 20 pounds, they'd write 20 in this row here. And that way, if someone's harvesting here and someone's harvesting over there and someone's harvesting over here, it doesn't really matter. All they're doing is the same process. They're taking the tote, they're putting it on the scale, and then they're writing in that amount on this row. So this is a really easy way to just keep track of exactly how much production you're getting off each row. And again, there's one Google sheet, which this might look a little bit complicated because it's fully filled out, but it really isn't. So you can see it's a Google or Excel sheet that has 7 tabs that correspond to each block. And it also has 9 columns, which are also correspond to each row and each block, obviously. So at the end of the day, each day, once people are putting on the scale and writing down how much production is coming off of each row, again, Ashley at the end of the day just easily writes in the date. She finds the block and the row, and she writes in how much production we got off of that row. So then at the end of the season, it's going to look something like this. It's going to be fully populated, and it's going to give you a real snapshot of how your farm did over the season. And it's going to be really easy to see exactly what worked and what didn't work. So once it's fully populated, we are able to see a ton of information from this Google sheet here. We have what is planted, so that's red oak. We have the date it was planted, which was March 26th here. We have the date that it was pulled, which is June 25th. We have when we started to harvest it, so we can see it took about a month from planting to our first harvest in this row. We have how much production we got from each crop. So red oak from March 26th to June 24th produced almost 70 pounds, which is great. So we have the total amount for that specific crop. We have the total amount down here for the specific row. So we know row 1 in block 4 produced 100 and let's say 19 pounds of everything throughout the season. And then we also have the total amount per block. And then we can see exactly what worked well and what didn't work well. And we can kind of plan our next season based off of all of this information, which is exactly what we do. Yeah, the sheet comes in super handy. Again, it's just a snapshot. You can see here, or when I look at this block, again, we can tell exactly how much production came off of block 4. Usually we're trying to get about $20,000 to $21,000 per block, but this one is about $16,000. But it's not a huge deal because I can see here in row 5 and 6 that the kale that we planted for some reason just didn't do that well. So it wasn't very productive. And then over here as well isn't very productive. So I understand why it's at $16,000 and not up to 21, which again is just good information to have if you're growing forward. Because if you didn't have that information, you'd probably just make the same mistake again and do the exact same thing that you did the year before. So the two main reasons why we're keeping track of all this information is definitely so we can see what worked well and what didn't work well, and get rid of what didn't work well and keep what really does work well, and then cross-reference this Excel sheet to do our crop planning. And crop planning for us looks something like this. So again, it's the same farm design. We're cross-referencing all of that information that we had before, which was, again, super easy to keep track of because it was one whiteboard. And then at the end of the day, Ashley would just take out her phone and populate it into that Excel sheet. I don't really know how much easier it could get from there. But, when you're crop planning and planning a whole season, for me, this looks a lot less daunting because I can see that each block really is only getting planted 3 or 4 times, which really isn't that much. And then we just kind of have to manage that time frame. The reason why this is good as well is because you can really plan with a lot more precision now, because you can see here, we'll plant red oak March 23rd. And the reason why it's March 23rd is because we know from last year, we planted it on March 26th, right? So we know we can plant it on March 23rd. We know we're going to pull it on June 22nd because we know that it started to go to flower, just not producing, on June 25th. So it makes it really easy for us to really precisely know when we're going to plant things and know when we're going to pull things. And then literally it takes 1 day for us to pull, prep, put compost in those rows, and we'll replant Mizuna right away on June 23rd. So that is kind of the operating systems in general in terms of how to keep track of the production down on our site. I definitely hope that made sense. It seems, obviously it's a bit easier when you're in it, but 2 Excel sheets, 2 whiteboards, that's all you need to be able to get all the information that you need to actually be successful and move forward. I'm going to skip these guys because I feel like we're kind of running out of time. We'll get to some revenue streams. These are the 3 revenue streams that we have used, and we'll kind of go through these. So there's a CSA, which I'm sure a lot of you guys know, Community Supported Agriculture, an RSA, which is Restaurant Supported Agriculture. The CSA model is great because, it's a pretty easy stream to kind of get into. It's guaranteed sales. The main advantage is that all the produce is prepaid for, which allows you to budget with greater precision, and nothing's better kind of than guaranteed sales. It also kind of has a risk sharing aspect to it. So the idea is that CSA model, the risk inherent in agriculture is shared between the farmer and the CSA member. They're really there and supporting you, and understand that, if there's a bad season, if there's hail, if there's crazy winds, if there's pests, they understand that they might get less than what they paid for, but if the season's good, then they're going to get more than what they paid for. So that's a really nice way to kind of bring them on board and just have them support your farming organization. The problem for me with a CSA is that there's just a lot of individual customers, which I think is great, but in terms of the reality of managing a lot of customers, it takes a lot of time and effort to be emailing and making sure everyone's getting everything and deal with, people not showing up or, not wanting this or not wanting that. It's just a lot of time and effort. So when I looked at that model, I just said, why don't we just do restaurant supported agriculture? And instead of having, 60 or 70 different CSA members, we can just go get 3 restaurants and make it super easy because we're only delivering to 3 people and that's it. So we were able to convince 3 restaurants in our first year to, pay us $25,000 each over 7 months. And we were just growing produce and shoving it into their fridge and they were using it. And it was a great way for us to kind of work out our production and also just kind of get a little bit more revenue, guaranteed revenue coming through and only having to deal with 3 customers as opposed to whatever it would be, 70 or 80 different individual customers. That was a great way to start for us because we were able to generate enough revenue in our first year to be able to, understand that we were onto something, because I know that there was a local farmer on the similar amount of space that wasn't doing that, and he was in his 10th year of farming. So we were onto something. We still weren't making, any money really, because it was just so inefficient, but we knew we were onto something, and I just needed to systematize the business and kind of make it a bit more efficient to figure out, how we could really make this all work. Selling to restaurants, we built our business on selling to restaurants. Obviously, last year was a bit crazy, but I think there's a lot of benefits to selling to restaurants, and obviously they're the ones that are going to be, buying the most amount of product. But again, it's all about selling your why. You really got to differentiate yourself. I've never wanted to be kind of this producer-buyer relationship where they're just buying vegetables from us. I wanted them to be a partner and be part of creating this kind of more sustainable food system with me, not just me selling the product. And that's really what I was trying to, and what I've always been, quote unquote, selling to people, is the ability for them to come on board with us and be part of this new food system. Chefs are awesome. They're the most, knowledgeable, passionate, inspired about fresh local produce. It's easy to get them on board if you can, deliver a consistent, convenient product to them. And you're also able to kind of sell them on the fact that it reignites their passion for cooking. I mean, if you're an executive chef that got into cooking and preparing food as a livelihood, you don't want to be opening up plastic boxes with produce that's 2 weeks old and then, working with that. You want to work with fresh produce. You want to be reinvigorated. You want to feel good about what you're doing. And that's what local, food production has with the benefits for chefs, is that it really gets their passion going. And if you can create a system where it's more sustainable when they get it, they get on board. So again, for us, it's really never been about selling produce to restaurants. It's been about kind of selling that that partnership, that ability to feel like they're part of the solution as well. This is what we give to restaurants. Again, it's offering them a lot of intangible values. So obviously they're getting local fresh produce. They're getting consistency and convenience. We're delivering twice a week, so it's always super fresh. We're making our, ordering system super easy for them. We want them to not think about us. We want to make this as easy as possible for them. Not many restaurants are able to kind of support this hyper local food economy. That's something. Promotional value, again, this is a partnership. We promote them just as much as we promote ourselves. Any media coverage we get, we'll always try and mention them as well. Well-informed staff, because we're downtown and we're so close, they can actually come down to the site, and we'll give them the talking points and give the servers you know, some genuine information and a genuine experience. So then when they go back and are serving their customers, they have this genuine knowledge to have this conversation, which increases the experience of the customer because the chef's excited, the server's excited, now this customer's excited because they can walk across the bridge, you know, and shake, you know, come to the farm. It's just a different dining experience, which kind of takes it to that next level. So again, there's other things that we're bringing to these restaurants that's not just produce. But like I said before, you know, they're definitely, the benefits is for restaurants in terms of kind of a business side of things is that they are willing to pay, you know, a premium price, the highest price point for fresh local produce, which is really great. And they also buy a lot of it, which is awesome in terms of building your business. It's also a one-time, you know, shot. So you deliver once a week. It takes an hour, you know, to do it, and you're in, you're out with, you know, however many pounds you just delivered to them, and it's just super easy and straightforward. Yeah, when you're working with restaurants, it's always good to exceed expectations. It's really the competitive advantage is your customer service. If you're wanting to hook in chefs, you want to do things that the big guys can't. So for example, we would always, you know, offer them in our first couple of years, just the ability to, you know, phone us up and we'll get produce to them whenever they want. So obviously there's deliveries twice a week, but if we deliver on 20 pounds on Friday and they have a crazy busy weekend and the chef phones me on Sunday and says, hey, Chris, can we grab some more? I'd say, no problem. I'll go down there right now and I'll harvest it for you and it will be there in an hour. So he gets super fresh produce, and it's something that we're able to do that kind of exceeds their expectations because we know the big guys can't do that, but we can. When we're working with chefs, we're focusing on quality, quantity. So we want to produce the highest quality produce possible. We want to do it, you know, at the quantity they need to supply their restaurant, but we want to do it consistently and conveniently, which is super important because we do talk with a lot of chefs that really do want to support local food production, and they'll start doing it, but sometimes, you know, the consistency and convenience factor is really kind of the detriment to local farmers. The distribution just isn't where they need it to be able to run their restaurants the way that they need to. So again, I'm really focusing on making the chef's life easier with, you know, smaller varieties. Doing them really well and doing them super consistently can definitely go a long way. If you've never approached a restaurant before, this is exactly what you do. Call them up, cold call them at 3 o'clock, 3:30-ish. That's usually when restaurants are slowest. Ask directly for the chef, say who you are, and if there's a time you can come and meet them or meet them over Zoom. And then the thing the chefs want to know is who you are, what you sell, how much you sell it for, and when it's available. So if you can tell them all that, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get them on board with your operation. And then just quickly, the pros and cons with chefs. There's a lot. Like I said, they pay the most for products and they use the most. They're super passionate and knowledgeable. So it's really easy to get them on board with, you know, buying fresh local produce. And they also understand seasonality, which is also really good. They understand that, you know, they're not going to be getting tomatoes from us in March. We don't have the greenhouse to be doing it. And that's okay. So they're totally understanding. The cons, though, is that they're type A personalities. So you got to be able to deal with type A personalities. Sometimes they're, you know, sometimes hard to deal with. They're transient. You know, chefs come and go in a lot of these restaurants. So you got to be able to go and build relationships with new chefs sometimes. And then just also understanding that they're running a business as well. So, and that's why it's really important to build that strong relationship, because if their boss is looking at their numbers and their margins and you don't really have a strong relationship with them and you haven't sold them on this partnership and this why they should be buying from you, usually that higher price point produce might be the first thing to go. So that's why developing the relationships is super important. So we sell also at an on-site market. You guys could do it at an off-site market. We transitioned due to COVID to essentially straight direct to consumer. Most of our stuff was sold at our on-site market because obviously all the restaurants shut down. There's lots of silver linings that came out of that. You know, we didn't realize how busy that market could actually get. We were able to support other farmers by buying and selling their produce when they were really struggling, which was great. It allowed us to provide more variety to our customers, and ultimately allowed us to achieve our goal of increasing local food production and promoting local food production as well, because we were able to promote all these amazing local farms that are around. The pros for the on-site market is definitely cash flow for sure. Restaurants, sometimes you invoice them, take a month or two to pay, so that's always kind of frustrating. With markets, you know, using Square, the payments are in your bank account the next day, which is awesome, makes everything easier. It's always Farmer Appreciation Day at the market. Most of the people that come in are so happy and pleasant and love what you're doing and say how much they support you and everything that you're doing. So it makes you feel good about yourself, that is for sure. And then it's also a really easy place to start if you're intimidated to work with restaurants and you just want to kind of produce food and see if you can sell it. You know, just get into a market or set up a market at your site if you're in an urban setting. Put a table up and put some produce on it, and hopefully people will come and buy it from you. There are some cons though. Definitely longer hours. You actually have to be there at the table, you know, the whole time that you're there. So if you're an off-site market, you know, with setup and takedown, this could easily be, you know, 8 to 12-hour days, depending on where the market is. When you're starting out, it's obviously smaller quantities that you're selling in individual items, which can be a bit harder. And then also the opinions and perspectives. You know, 98% of people are amazing that come into the market, but there's always a couple of people that come in, especially when we talk about sustainability and farming and food. A lot of people have their own perspectives and opinions, and essentially can just be downright rude. But that's okay. Everyone's entitled to their own perspective and opinions. But we do have the customer is not always right policy at our market. And if anyone is rude or, you know, degrading or anything towards anyone, we'll just ask them not to come back and they can go get their produce somewhere else. Tips for selling at the market is definitely customer service. You want to be standing up. You don't want to be sitting down. You want to be engaging. You want to get people into your market and you know, invite them to come and see what you're doing. Stand up, you know, get around from the table, actually go and literally, you know, invite them to come see what you're doing, engage with what they're doing. Because if you're going to be there, you might as well try your hardest to sell everything that you have. Something that we do is we always try and remember people's names, because I feel like there's nothing better when you come back to a business and someone says, "Oh, hey Chris, how's it going? Good to see you again." Just remembering people's names, I think, is a huge underrated thing in terms of customer service. You want to create an illusion of abundance. So even if you don't have a lot of stuff, you want to make it look like you have a lot of stuff. People are way more inclined to buy things when there's an illusion of abundance. And this can kind of be done with, you know, just getting some crates and getting some different levels in terms of what your table looks like. Instead of having everything flat on the ground, just get some levels so you can kind of make it look like you have more than you actually have. And then promotional materials. Always have promotional materials that people can take home with them so they can read about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And again, just hook them into that feeling of wanting to support something positive and being part of, you know, your purpose and why you're doing it. Thank you so much. I know I was talking a lot. I really hope that was helpful. I want to thank you guys again so much for coming to this presentation, and I hope you guys have a lot of questions and we can, get more food production in more cities. Woo.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. That was fantastic. I just learned a lot. I'm just going to digest it here. And I think now would be a great time for us to take a quick break. So it's 6:29 by my clock. Let's come back at 6:40 and we'll dive into our other topics for the day, the young agrarians, and also some stuff around food growing policy from the city of Victoria. So take a break, stretch your legs, grab a glass of water, and we'll see you back here at 6:40. All right, we are at 6:40 on the dot, so I figure we can move ahead to the next part of our presentation, and I would love to welcome Asia Jones-Martin from the Young Agrarians to start speaking about all the wonderful work that they do. And get this going here. There we go. Over to you, Asia.
Thank you so much, Brianna. So my name's Asia Jones-Martin. I'm the Vancouver Island land matcher for Young Agrarians, delivering the BC land matching program here on the island. So Young Agrarians is a farmer-to-farmer resource network for new and young entrants into agriculture in Canada. We're collaborating with FED in working to connect farmers with land opportunities for urban farming in Victoria. So today we're going to start with a little bit of information on Young Agrarians, the BC land matching program, and land access resources that we offer, and then about assessing your readiness to start a farm and about assessing land for farming, and then also important land access agreement considerations. Next slide. Just want to thank our funders for the BC land matching program on Vancouver Island, Ministry of Agriculture, the Real Estate Foundation of BC, and Patagonia. Next slide. So the goal of Young Agrarians is to grow the next generation of farmers. And next slide. This is how we do that. We offer online tools and resources, educational and networking events throughout the year on farm and off, and online too. And we also have land access programs, the BC land matching program, tools, resources, and education, and also a provincial business mentorship program that pairs up new farmers with experienced farm mentors to help them in startup. So we do community engagement online and then bring people together in real time to learn from each other, do site visits of each other's farms, share resources. Farming can be super isolating, and there hasn't been a whole lot of support for new farmers, so this community is a really valuable resource. Next slide. So the BC Land Matching Program was launched in 2016 to make connections between new farmers and landholders for the development of new farm sites, and also to develop lease agreements that give everyone security so the investment and energy each person is putting into the new farm is protected. The program was developed in collaboration with Arter, an organization which is making successful matches in Quebec. And we started with a pilot program in the Lower Mainland in 2016. And then in 2018, it was expanded to Vancouver Island, as well as the Okanagan, Columbia Basin. And now we have land matcher in the Central North as well. We've made over 128 matches on 6,000 acres in those years. Next slide. So as a land matcher, I work to connect farmers and landholders. I help landholders assess their opportunities, determining whether a site is ready for farming, and talk with them about their vision for their land. I explain what land sharing agreements can look like, what type of agreement could fit their vision. And I also work with farmers to support them in business readiness, working with them on their business plan, connecting them to resources. And then where it seems like there could be a fit, I facilitate introductions, do site visits and negotiations between the parties. And when we find a match, I write a lease agreement that defines the terms of the agreement, which is reviewed by a Young Agrarians lawyer before signing. And then if needed, I'm available to facilitate any further conversations down the road as a neutral third party. So if you're looking for land on Vancouver Island or the Gulf Islands, I'd be really happy to talk with you about your search. You can reach out to me directly at asia@youngagrarians.org, and I'll put that in the chat. And elsewhere in the province, you can reach out to the contact info on this slide, land@youngagrarians.org. So if you would like, there's tons of resources on our website. You can find our main resources on our land page. The blog is a great tool. There's about 4,000 people that visit it every month. The most popular blog posts are about land opportunities. And then you can also be sure to check out the land access guide, which has great case stories of farmers' experiences of how they access their land, as well as a new transition toolkit for non-family farmland ownership transitions, and lease and license templates, and lots more resources. The next slide. So this is the UMAP. You can view land listings and add yourself to the map to show what you're looking for geographically. Farmers looking for land can add themselves, and then people with farmland can for lease can add a land listing as well. You just use the submit a listing button at the bottom of the map. You can also find links to lots of resources on here as well to help you launch and run a farm business. And we've also just added a new garden sharing listing type as well, which connects landowners with smaller, more urban generally opportunities with gardeners who are looking for spaces to grow. So it's kind of a smaller scale, less focus on commercial production necessarily, and people connect with each other independently without my support. Next slide. So farmers, are you ready to start your own farm? How much experience do you have farming? I really recommend spending at least a few years working on other people's farms before starting your own farm business, not only to gain experience, but also to try it out and make sure that farming is what you really want to be doing before diving in and making that investment and commitment. And then what kind of farm do you want to run? What are you going to produce? How are you going to market your product? What kind of infrastructure are you going to need? How much is it going to cost to get set up and running? Next slide. So, and then assessing land for agriculture. When you're looking at land as a potential site for a farm business, there's lots of factors to consider. In an urban context, there's things to think about that might be a bit different from more rural land opportunities. Like in Chris's case, is there even soil? If you're building growing space, is that something that that would be your investment and yours to take away at the end of the agreement? Or is that something that would stay with the land and perhaps being co-invested in by the landholder? What's the exposure like? Is there enough sun? Is it really windy? What's the water access? Parking, how can you access the site? Are there buildings or structures available for your use? Could you build anything? Can customers access the site? Some of these questions are dependent on what the landholder is okay with on the site. So finding a personal fit with the landholder you can work with and communicate well with is really important. Which brings me to the importance of building relationships. The next slide. We consistently experience that the most important part of a good land sharing agreement is the relationship between the farmer and the landholder. Everyone involved needs to be able to openly communicate about what's important to them in the use of the land, what they want to see happen and what they don't want to see happen. In negotiating an agreement, you need to walk through all the what ifs, trying to anticipate as much as possible what may come up down the road so there aren't any major surprises. And so let's talk a little bit about the important terms that go into an agreement. Some of the points that are highest on people's lists when they're negotiating agreements are the lease term. Is this going to be a short or a long-term lease? What makes sense for the future plans of the landowner, balancing that with the investment in the land that the farmer will be making. The farmer may want to be able to root in and create a long-term enterprise on the land, or maybe the farmer only wants to use a space for a short term or on a year-to-year basis. There always needs to be an exit strategy. Talk through all the scenarios and make sure everyone feels comfortable. Price, consider what value the land has to the farmer, location, security that can be offered, and what value a leasing farmer brings, such as maintaining the space, providing a sense of community, aesthetics. Other things to negotiate are how are the expenses and infrastructure going to be shared? Taxes, fees, utilities, who should pay what? Access, when and why does the landlord have the right to enter the property? Are there restrictions on when the farmer can enter the leased area? Permitted and prohibited uses, such as different types of farming, whether it's okay to have a farm stand, what types of machinery can be brought on the land, or for example, is it okay to keep bees? Capital improvements like fencing, how do you decide who's responsible for what? Liability, will tenants need insurance? Is the landlord going to be co-insured? So here I'd just love to dive in to hear a little bit from Chris about his experience with his lease agreement. So Chris, if you're there, I'd love to ask you, what was it like when you approached the developer for the site that you're at?
Uh, so, sorry. Yeah, it was interesting. It's an interesting process. We were on a rooftop for our pilot project, and they got in touch with us actually, which was really nice. They had, like I said, 10,000 square feet of undeveloped land that they were kind of just doing beta testing on. So they were putting food trucks there, and they wanted, an urban farm. It was really just a 6-month lease because they said, "Hey, why don't you try it out?" And I said, "Yeah, for sure." So that was good. And then once we were kind of, again, like I said, it had our foot in the door and we're able to kind of prove to them that this could work and that there was some value to them, we were able to sit down with them and kind of negotiate year-to-year leases. It's a bit, I'm not going to say daunting. It's different, right? When you're working with developers, they deal with numbers in the multi-million-dollar range. They have land that's worth literally tens of millions of dollars in downtown Victoria. So to convince them of what we're trying to do, again, keeping track of, like I said, that data just allows us to go in and kind of speak their language a little bit more in terms of, what type of numbers we're looking at and the insurance and all that kind of stuff. So I would say, yeah, it's a bit interesting, but I would say, again, like what we did with the Street to Sky interviews, we interviewed about 30 or 40 different developers, and most of them want urban agriculture. They really, really do, and they fully support it. They just want to know that the people coming onto their sites kind of have all their ducks in a row, or at least can sound like they have all their ducks in a row, because I definitely had no idea what I was doing, but could make it kind of sound like I knew what I was doing a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of been the sense I've got from those urban landowners, is that it really has to be someone who has a pretty well thought out business plan and knows what they're doing for them to want to take the risk in leasing land to them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that they could do with that land. The piece of land that we're on right now, I'm sure they could rent it out just, as parking for $10,000 a month to the shipyards across the road. But for us, obviously, they're not getting nearly that much, but they do get the promotional capital and the social and environmental capital, and developers do like that, especially Dockside Green, where we are, being a green developer. It gives them a bit more credibility in terms of their LEED certification, because they can say they have an urban farm there. And if you can prove that you can really bring together the community that's there and offer them a good product and not make too much of a mess or have it be too much of a nuisance for us to be there, then they want to support it 100%. Great.
So I guess that was probably a key learning. What were the biggest takeaways that you came across in developing that lease and navigating that relationship development?
I think the biggest takeaway for sure is that, at least for me personally, is, you got to know kind of when to pick your battles, I guess. I mean, with urban agriculture, growing the food is just one piece of the puzzle to creating a better food system, right? We need the land, which is the developers, and then we need the customers, which for us was the restaurants. So again, for us, it was a partnership model. We wanted to partner with developers and we wanted to partner with restaurant owners. But really the understanding was, we don't own this land, and that's always been part of the model. And being able to kind of check, at least like my ego, my pride sometimes, and just pick the battles, because sometimes they want us to do something that, I wouldn't be doing if I just own the land and could do whatever I wanted to. There's permits that you got to go through, there's bylaws, there's insurance that they need to be covered for, there's insurance that we need to be covered for. This isn't just a piece of land where we can erect a greenhouse and do whatever we want all the time and have compost here and everything be messy. They want things to be certain ways. And luckily I want our business to be clean and look aesthetically pleasing as well. But I mean, that's something that we do have to consider in an urban setting, is that we have to take into consideration what the developer wants their land to look like as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always a key part of my role in navigating these conversations, is bringing both parties to the table and have both of their needs and wants heard to try and get that all into one agreement.
Totally, yeah.
What was it like for you when you developed your lease?
It was, yeah, I mean, it was interesting only because I didn't know what I was doing at all. So again, partnering and building a relationship with the developer was really just my strategy, and getting them on board with what we're doing. And for the first couple of years, they essentially had their lawyers write up the lease, and I would look over it, and it would be very official, and just kind of made sure that they weren't completely screwing me, but for them, they were just covering all of their bases. And then I was able to just see a lease agreement and then just kind of work my way from there. But really, it was developing the relationship with the developer, getting them on board with what we're doing, having them trust me, and then also me trusting them by them developing that lease and making sure all of our all our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. And that was okay with me, because again, I have no problem admitting I didn't know what I was doing at first, for sure, and we needed help along the way. So we're trying to just make sure it works for everyone, and just move kind of the mission forward.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris.
No worries.
Yeah, so I mean, as Chris highlights here, the importance of getting everything written on paper and having everybody's needs heard is so important, and developing that relationship and making sure that everybody's protected and taken care of. So my involvement in this process is is to be a third party to help have those conversations and talk about all those difficult things that sometimes get missed in developing an agreement that'll make sure everybody is taken care of for. So please feel free to reach out if you are looking for land or have land to offer. I don't know if anyone on this call does in Victoria, but that's the next slide shows the next steps is to reach out. And there's the UMAP, as we mentioned, where you can add yourself, what you're looking for or offering, and just get in touch to start a conversation about looking to be matched with a farmer or land for farming.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Asia. That was fantastic. I'm just going to do my transition over, and just very shortly we'll have Virginie from the City of Victoria speaking to us more about some of those things that you need to consider on the policy permit side of things. All right, Virginie, may I pass it over to you?
Sure. I'm sorry, I'm just having a quick bit of a challenge here with my slide. Let me just hop out and hop back in. This should not take too long. Thank you for bearing with me here. All right. Thank you, Brianna, and thank you, Asia and Chris, for those great presentations. I will say I'm a little bit nervous because it is a tough act to follow, especially when you're going to talk about bylaws and licenses. But, don't fall off your chairs with excitement. Don't leave the Zoom meeting. I really think you should stick around for this last presentation. Essentially, like, knowing about city regulations can save you time and money. And I also think it can help you get community buy-in and foster positive relationships with your neighbors, customers, and your local government. So my name is Virginie, and I work as Food Systems Coordinator with the City of Victoria. So I help with anything related to community gardening, boulevard gardening, but also anything related to urban farming in the city. So I'm here to help. My goal with this presentation is to give you a sense of how city regulations can impact the development and the ongoing operations of your urban farm. And I hope that this information can help you navigate your way within or around city regulations that apply to your context. And this information might also help those of you who want to engage with your local government to change city regulations and enable farming, because that can be a need. And I do have a bit of a disclaimer before we jump in. The examples of city regulations that I will share in my presentation, they're all specific to the city of Victoria. So if you farm outside the city of Victoria, these regulations just won't apply to you. And also each municipality is different. So it's important that you connect with your own local government to see what regulations actually apply to your farming business. And then finally, I'm not a professional planner. I do have pretty solid knowledge and experience about urban planning in the context of food systems, but my advice or opinion really don't replace those of a professional planner or city staff. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, impact of city regulations on urban farms. So there's several questions that capture how city regulations can impact your urban farming business. So where are you farming? With whom are you farming? Do you have employees? What do you grow or raise? Veggies, shoots, flowers, honey, eggs. What are your production methods? Do you compost, use pesticides, or do you need machinery? What kind of structures or buildings are you using? A greenhouse, a walk-in cooler maybe? When and where will you sell your crop? And all of these questions matter when it comes to city regulation. So I organized a presentation under 4 broad areas: urban farming activities, infrastructures, selling your crops or sales, and then community concerns. And then for each area, I'm going to look at the type of regulations that might apply to urban farming. And I'm going to use the city of Victoria as an example. And next slide, please. So I think the city of Victoria is quite a good example, actually. In 2015, the city conducted this citywide consultation process on how we can increase urban food production. So we asked local food experts and the community at large, what needs to change to increase urban food production? And in response, in direct response to what we heard, we removed a bunch of red tape to enable urban farming. We also introduced new programs that encourage and support people to garden on public lands, including boulevard gardens or city parks. So in this presentation, I'm really going to focus on growing food to sell, is the commercial angle of urban agriculture. And in Victoria, the commercial angle of urban agriculture pretty much happens only on private lands, though there's a few exceptions. But if you want more information on the city's programs about gardening on public land, city lands, check out victoria.ca/growing the city. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about activities. And we're going to talk most specifically about zoning, really. So zoning is essentially the division of a municipality into different zones or districts. And in each zone or district, there are different activities that are prohibited and some that are permitted. So in other words, zoning is really about figuring out what activities or buildings are allowed where. And one important question for you as an urban farmer is what activities or buildings are permitted in the zone that you farm in. So for example, urban agriculture, or another similar term, it may or may not be allowed in the zone in which you want to farm. Or sometimes, while urban agriculture itself may not be excluded from your zone, so it might be allowed, there's other related activities that are needed for urban farming, like composting, landscaping, the ability to sell. Those activities may not be permitted, even though urban agriculture is permitted. Also, definitions really matter. So if urban agriculture is permitted, how urban agriculture is defined is really important. So I'm going to use the city of Victoria here to illustrate a little bit what I'm talking about. So back in 2015, before the city of Victoria removed a bunch of that red tape, urban agriculture was a permitted use in the city's zoning regulation bylaw. But the bylaw was still quite restrictive, and so urban farmers were limited in what they could do and where they could do it. Urban agriculture was pretty much allowed only in residential zones. Technically, you could have farmed in areas that were zoned industrial, where activities like manufacturing and warehousing are permitted. But like most urban farmers, were not interested in industrial areas, They thought arable land was limited, the risk of soil contamination was higher, and there limitation in retail sales. Now I understand that topsoil shows that like actually these types of areas could be used for urban food production, but at the time most farmers thought it's not really the type of places that we want to go. Another limitation was that farmers had to live on the site where they farmed. So many urban farmers farm at multiple sites, or they live and they farm at different sites, right? So sometimes there's no house on the site where urban agriculture is happening. And topsoil is another great example of that, right? Another challenge was that only 2 people could farm on one site. But the thing is that urban farming relies on a bunch of volunteers, apprentices, and multiple part-time staff who, like, again, will live off-site. So 2 people is just sometimes not enough. And then finally, the definition of urban agriculture was pretty limited. It did not include food packaging, processing, or storage, all of which are activities that you need to be able to do if you're gonna do some urban farming. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was a lot of information. Here's what changed since 2015. A bunch of bylaw amendments were made to enable urban farming. More specifically, urban agriculture is now allowed in all zones. So you can farm anywhere throughout the city. You could be farming in a yard or on a rooftop or in a parking lot. You can have an urban farming business anywhere in the city. You don't have to live on the site where you farm, and you can have as many people as you want that are engaged in urban agriculture on one site. And then the definition of urban agriculture was quite significantly expanded. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the new definition. In Victoria, urban agriculture is called small-scale commercial urban food production. Now, it's now defined as A, cultivating and harvesting plants or fungi, B, beekeeping and harvesting honey, C, keeping poultry to collect eggs, and D, sorting, cleaning, and packaging the items noted above for retail purposes, as well as selling and storing harvested products on the premises. So as you can see, it's much more encompassing. Next slide, please. Okay, infrastructures. So this is about building, landscaping, permits. What permits do I need to build or expand my urban farm? So local governments use permits to review and approve plans before any work is done. So that way a city can ensure that building or landscaping plans will comply with city regulations. The regulations could include bylaws, like the zoning regulation bylaw we just talked about, or it could be building codes. So codes will set standards to meet health, safety, fire protection, and accessibility objectives. And one of the important questions for you as an urban farmer, again, is what permits do I need to build or to expand my urban farm? So you usually need a permit if you're building or demolishing a structure that is over a certain size. So what you see on this slide right now is a small greenhouse that is less than 100 square feet or less than 10 square meter, and it does not require a building permit. So you also need a permit if you're changing or installing electrical wiring, plumbing fixtures, or a small sign. Some permits will require review and approval from a professional. So for example, a building permit might require sign off by an architect or an engineer. So you can start seeing how, if you have a large greenhouse with grow lights, it would need an electrical permit, a plumbing permit, and certainly a building permit. So there's also this thing called development permits. Sometimes you can have an area that's designated as a development permit area. And those development permit areas, are about identifying areas in a city that need special treatment. And special treatment could be anything from we want to protect the natural environment in that specific area, or we want to promote a certain type of development. So in Victoria, back in 2015, we heard from urban farmers that the cost and the time of obtaining that development permit was quite a barrier to the expansion of urban agriculture. And so to address this specific challenge, the city regulations were changed to exempt urban agriculture from requiring a development permit for landscaping. And so what does it mean? It's essentially one less permit to apply for. But you will still need to apply for building, electrical, plumbing, or a sign permit if your project requires that. And I think Chris could certainly talk more about that experience of applying for permits as well, because he's had to go through that. And I will say that, urban farmers, they pretty consistently identify building permits for greenhouses or cold tunnels as a barrier to establishing year-round farming operations. but the city still requires permits for greenhouses. There's no exceptions for greenhouses, even if they're used for urban farming. Okay, next slide, please. So the city did do this one interesting thing in relation to rooftop greenhouses. Small rooftop greenhouses, I should say. So in urban settings, we know there's a lot of unused rooftops, and rooftops often have pretty good sun exposure. And in Victoria, the zoning regulation bylaw sets these very specific requirements for buildings, including limits on the height and the number of stories. So let's say you're a developer for an apartment building. You'll want to use all the allowed building height to build as many apartments as possible. Essentially, it makes sense for you to build and rent as many units as you can within the footprint that you're working with. But here's the thing, is that if you've already built to the allowed height limit, then you cannot add a rooftop greenhouse on top, because what would happen then is that you would bump your building above the allowed height limit. It all sounds pretty technical, but it's quite simple. To encourage the small rooftop greenhouses, Victoria said, okay, we're going to exempt all the rooftop greenhouses from those height and calculations. And what it means is that you can build your apartment building to the allowed limit, like as high as it can go, and then you can add a small greenhouse on top. And I'm going to emphasize small greenhouse because like these are quite small greenhouse, about 300 square feet max. But given how underused rooftops can be, even a bunch of small greenhouses have the potential to make a difference when it comes to year-round food production in cities. So the image that you're seeing on the screen is a drawing that shows the type dimension of greenhouse that are allowed on rooftops. Next slide, please. Okay, Sals, I'm sorry if I lost you there with the rooftop greenhouse tangent. Hoping to reel you back in and talk about sales. So what can you sell, where, and when? So as an urban farmer, business licenses and zoning regulations will impact where and how you'll sell your products. A business license is typically required by every business that's operating in the city. So if you want to grow and sell food, you will likely need a business license, right? Business licenses are typically regulated under a business license bylaw, and this bylaw identifies the type of business licenses that are available, so the type, and then the cost as well. The zoning regulation will tell you where and when you can sell your product. It also tells you what you can sell. So in Victoria, there were restrictions on the commercial sales of animals and animal products, and some farmers wanted to be able to sell eggs, honey, meats, and dairy. And there were also pretty important limitations and a good amount of confusion as to how and where an urban farmer could sell their product. So the city took a pretty innovative approach to address these challenges. Essentially, Victoria amended the business license bylaw and the zoning regulation bylaw in order to really expand the list of allowed products. So you can see on the screen now the products that you are allowed to grow and sell in Victoria. So these include raw, unprocessed fruits, vegetables and mushrooms, seeds, seedlings, plant cuttings, fibers, nuts, flowers, eggs, and honey. So you see eggs there. In Victoria, our animal responsibility bylaw says that we can keep up to 15 laying hens on a single property. And you see honey as well. There's no limits on the number of beehives that you can have on a property, but there are some setback requirements that will apply. Okay, another thing that the city did is the bylaw amendments also allowed off-site retail sales in all zones. So when Chris is talking about, selling to restaurant, that's a great example of an off-site retail sale. Another example would be, selling at a farmer's market, selling to a retailer, a box program where you're delivering the product, or any other private sales. So if you're going to get an off-site retail sales license, you're going to need to pay $100, and you will have that license for 1 year. The loading of the products into a delivery truck is permitted only one time per day per site, and it has to be between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. on weekday or Saturday. And then on Sundays or holidays, it's 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then the bylaws also allow on-site retail sales through farm stands. So let's look at the next slide, please. So what you should be seeing now is a diagram of a farm stand with a photo of a farm stand. And that one I think is quite exciting because it's pretty rare that you see farm stands that are explicitly allowed anywhere throughout a city. To have a farm stand, you need a business license, either a 3-month license that costs $25 or a 1-year license that costs $100. Only products that are grown on site can be sold at a food stand. So you can't have a food stand on one property, but be growing on the next property over. You have to grow and sell the food on the same location. There are some restrictions for opening hours. So 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays or Saturdays, and then 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Sundays or holidays. I will emphasize food stands do not require a building permit, but there are some dimension, design, placement, and food safety requirements that apply. And I think you can look at that diagram and get a sense of what those are. And then the photo, good example of what you'd find maybe in a food stand, I'm gonna guess early summer. So next slide, please. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of ground. Before we close, I'm just gonna briefly talk about a couple other city regulations that might come up for some of you. And that has to do with some community concerns and how we want to ensure the compatibility of urban agriculture with other land uses. So when we conducted Growing the City, the consultation, the community consultation, there was strong overall community support for urban agriculture, but there was also some specific concerns that came up, and those included noise, odors, lighting, parking, pollution. So the city essentially needed to ensure that urban agriculture was compatible with other land uses, and this is about finding a balance. Yep, we want more urban food production, but we also want it to be done in a way that keeps neighbors happy, and that's not detrimental to the environment. So that's why the sort of a few restrictions were introduced. So for example, the pesticide use reduction bylaw now restricts the use of pesticides in commercial urban agriculture. The zoning regulation bylaw specifies that urban agriculture should not negatively impact neighbors or the public with unreasonable levels of odor, noise, or artificial lighting. And then there are also the limits on farm stand opening hours and delivery truck pickup that we just talked about. Next slide, please. Okay, good job. You made it through. There's some take-home messages I'd like for you to consider. First one is think ahead. So really, it's worth contacting your local government as soon as possible, ideally before you start planning or building your farm. It can save you time and it can save you money, but it can also really help you foster good community relationships with your neighbors, your customers, and the local government. It's also better to anticipate what regulations you might need to consider when setting up your business than to react after the fact. Second, it takes time. Urban farming is a new area, so city staff do not frequently get asked about regulations related to urban farming. And keep in mind that what you're trying to do is probably very different from the typical inquiries or applications that staff receives. And because seasonality really matters in farming, give yourself and city staff lots of time to answer your questions or get the right permits before the growing season kicks in. 3, city regulations do not exist in a vacuum. So keep in mind that there will be other regulations from other level of governments that will apply to your urban farm. So city bylaws should be aligned with regulations from other levels of government. So for example, in Victoria, we need to keep eggs on a farm stand stored at 4 degrees Celsius in a cooler. But that regulation is a direct reflection of a regulation that's been put in place by Island Health, which is a regional health authority here on Vancouver Island. 4, regulations change. So regulations, they reflect how and where people live, work, play, and operate their business. So it's perfectly normal that regulations evolve. And so that's why I would encourage you as an urban farmer to constructively engage with your local government. And might be helpful to point to what other local governments have done to support urban food production. The City of Victoria is one example amongst many, and you can look for other examples in existing food policy databases. And if you live in BC or Alberta, I really suggest that you check out the Kwantlen Polytechnic University Food Policy Database, and the link is on the screen right now. Next slide, please. Yeah, that is my last slide. If you'd like to learn more, please go to victoria.ca/food production. That's the city portal for all things related to selling the food that you grew in the city of Victoria. And if you're feeling ready to get started and you want to start your urban farm in the city of Victoria, you'll definitely want to read a guide called the Small Scale Commercial Urban Food Production Handbook. If you want to learn more, about the programs to garden on public city lands. So not commercial enterprises, think more like community gardens or boulevard gardens. Then please visit victoria.ca/growing in the city. And I just want to mention that at the Growing in the City website, you're also going to find a guide that was created specifically to encourage growing food and gardening in developments. So it gives some really interesting examples of commercial urban farms on rooftops, urban hop production, and more. Yeah, and so I think that's it. Thanks so much for your attention. Please ask questions, but you can also contact me directly for more information. You have my email address up on the screen. And then finally, just a big thank you to FED for including the City of Victoria in this presentation, and to TOPSOIL and Young Agrarians for the great presentations. That's it for me. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Virginie. That was awesome. There's so much to talk about with policy, bylaws, all that fun stuff. So what we'll do now is open it up to Q&A. I'm just going to go and start combing through all of these amazing questions that we've been getting. So just bear with me a moment here. Chris, you've got quite a few questions coming your way. Just a heads up. All right. Okay, let's see here. Okay, Chris, if I may, I've got quite a few questions just from your talk. So first question I have for you here is, can you address where you source your geotextile planters from? How do you ensure that that textile is food safe and not an inauthentic version, i.e. is there a brand or name that you recommend? And follow up to that would be, have you found that the grow bags degrade after 5 to 6 years that you've been using them?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. We work with a company called High Caliper. They're called Smart Pots. They are the company that started the geotextile kind of container model, I guess. They've been doing it for about 30 years. They started as a tree bag. So they used to grow trees in these bags because the geotextile material would air prune the root systems. So then when you pull it out, it's this big, bald or bushy root system, as opposed to a plastic container where you just have one kind of tap root kind of circling around it, strangling itself. And then they found that, there was other applications, and obviously food production was one of them. They are BPA free. They're completely food safe material. There's tons of, containers that you can buy. Lots of knockoffs that probably have a bunch of random stuff in them. We use these guys, one, because they're really great. They've been doing it for a long time. It's food safe, it's BPA free. They're a bit more expensive, but again, we're looking at the durability and the longevity of them. So we've had them for now 6 years, and there's no sign of them degrading. We've put these containers through a lot. We've, weed whacked literally against them. We've dragged them around over gravel, over years. We've moved them from site to site. We picked them up. We've really put them through their paces, and they are still doing good. Super easy to store and wash, and it's nice because they're fabric material. What we've been doing over the last few years is essentially folding them in half, let's say 4 years ago, filling them up with soil just halfway full, and then essentially every time we're pulling and topping up with compost, we're just rolling up the container probably half an inch. So we're building the soil, harvest after, I guess, pulling and building the soil every time we put compost on it. And year after year, we'll just put fresh compost on, but only a top layer of it.
Great. Just a quick follow-up. What size are the bags they use?
So we use 15-gallon containers. we found that that's a good size. I know, the presentation was all about kind of efficiency and growing a small variety, but like I said, we've grown everything in these things. We've grown garlic and potatoes and all the herbs, all the eggplant, tomatoes, peppers, summer squash, cucumbers, potatoes. You can grow anything in these things. The reason why we did 15 gallons is that even because in our first year, you saw we were growing tomatoes and all that kind of stuff. So a fully grown tomato plant with a full of soil, 15 gallons of soil, you can still pick that up and move it around with one person. Once you're getting to 20 gallons or 25 gallons, it's getting really heavy. But the 15 gallons is also big enough for you to have enough soil in there to really have really healthy tomato plants and all those bigger kind of nutrient eating crops. So we just kind of found it was the perfect size.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
I guess on that note, can you talk a little bit more about how you regenerate your soil? You said that you put compost on top, but is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we start with really good compost. We've been using the same compost company for the past, since the beginning. So I guess 6 years. We don't compost on site. All of the pulled plants get picked up by the company that composts all the stuff for us. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, we're in an urban setting. We don't want compost down there. We don't want to attract rodents. We don't want smells and, potentially having, residents or people around not liking what we're doing. Also, we totally understand that composting is a full-on science and it's a whole different business. So again, I'm not going to try and tackle everything all at once. If someone's doing compost really, really well and they're doing it at the quantities that we need, it makes it a lot easier for us to just buy it from them, support them, and get really good compost down and make our lives easier. So yeah, we're just topping. Every time we pull the plants, we'll top up the containers with like a shovel full of fresh compost. We will use a lot of kelp fertilizer and organic liquid fertilizers just to kind of get the plants going. And then Ashley took the Organic Master Gardener's course through, I think, Royal Roads there. And she's actually developed a effective microorganism. So it's just a way for us to spray just really good biology back into the soil that the soil needs to kind of get revved up. And it's just something that she learned in her Organic Master Gardener's course, and it really works. So what we're trying to do is figure out, can you have the same, microbiology in 15 gallons of soil that biointensive super organic permaculture farms have in their soil as well? I'm not really I mean, we've been able to produce really great food at large quantities just from using compost and nothing else. But now we're trying these new organic forms and trying to get that biology in there. Our compost also started with no worms in it, and you can go down to I have no idea where they came from. I don't know how they got there, but all of our containers have so many worms in them. It's insane. So we're definitely doing something right. And again, I guess that's what happens when you just don't put anything bad in the soil and pretty much just use compost for most of it.
Nice. And for those people in the Victoria area, what company do you use for your compost?
It's a company called Refuse.
Yeah.
REFUSE. Yeah. So they do, they do lots of good stuff.
They do. Absolutely. Excellent. A great question here. Do you think there is room for more similar farms like Topsoil, or do you think diversity would be needed in order to support more operations? Like, how's the market? Is it diluted?
Well, I mean, we're literally the only ones doing it. I mean, Mason Street's been doing it for a long time. They're doing great stuff. They produce lots of salad greens as well. We never have any crossovers with them. For me, it's not about like we want people to start doing this more. The reason why we give this seminar, I'm literally giving away everything we've done for the past 5 years, is that we want people to do it. I don't think that you can really oversaturate the market with, you know, having a few more urban farms in. But again, it's really like what you're doing and why you're doing it. You can grow unique varieties if you want to, if you know, some people will buy it. You don't just have to do salad greens. It's just trying to figure out that model by, trying it out, keeping track of that data, seeing if it did work. And if it did work, keep doing it. If it didn't, then, try something else. And that's really what farming is all about. The best piece of advice that I ever got in terms of business or farming was from a farmer. It was JJ from Mason Street Farm. He's the nursery manager there. Because I was asking her my first year, I was like, I don't know how to grow food. I didn't say that in the presentation, but I don't have any farming or gardening background whatsoever. So when I started this the first year, I literally had no idea what I was doing. So I asked JJ how to grow tomatoes, and she said, you're going to ask 10 different farmers how to grow tomatoes and you're going to get 10 different answers. And for me, that was just the light bulb moment where I was like, oh, I just get to go and figure this out for myself. That's perfect. I love doing that anyways. And that's just what farming is trying stuff, watching it. If it doesn't work, don't do it again. If it does work, keep doing it. And that's kind of just how you grow any business, really. So I don't think you can oversaturate. And if people wanted to grow more salad greens, I think from a business standpoint, that's probably, from a purely business standpoint, that's bad for me. But if they come out of this presentation and start an urban farm and start growing salad greens, the mission of why I started this business has now been achieved, because we've been able to increase local food production. And again, from a social entrepreneurship standpoint, that's the main goal. The main goal isn't to just have it all to myself. The main goal is how do we get more food production in more communities? And I think that's, what we need to do. So yes, please do start urban farming and grow salad greens for more restaurants. There's lots of restaurants and there's lots of people.
Absolutely. Great. What else? Oh, there was, here we go. Do you think your system could be certified as organic farming based on your model?
Yeah, so I think it could be. I've been talking with a professor up at UVic who's trying to get us certified organic. In an urban setting, I don't really want to be certified organic. All our principles are, insight in mind. If you want to come down and see exactly what we're doing, you're more than welcome to do it. Come to the on-site market. If you want to ask questions, we can show you exactly what we're doing. You're able to certify our practices for yourself. When people are out of site, that's probably when you want to get certified organic, because you want to have that that authority. You want people to, really believe that you're doing things well. And when you're certified organic, that's kind of what that's the that's what people are gonna believe. But for us, we don't even want to be certified organic, because I think just being able to have people come down and see our operation and see what we're doing, I think is good enough. But I guess the answer to that question is that I think it could be, based on what the professor at UVic has been telling me.
Okay, excellent. I think Virginie touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can be clear. What sort of permits, if any, do you need to be able to sell to restaurants? Just your business license?
Yeah, so Virginie touched on that. It's just a business license to sell off-site, which is, I think it's $100 for the year, or you can get a 3-month one for $25. So it's super easy. You can either just go into City Hall or do it online, and then you're good to go.
Great.
Also, I will say as well, just on that note as well, producing vegetables in terms of Vancouver Island health and safety, it's the lowest risk thing that you can actually sell as well. So yes, get in touch with them just if you want to make sure, but in terms of actually selling the product, you don't really need any permits from them either, because it's the lowest risk item on their list of things to take care of.
Cool. And another question here, which I think would be helpful for people, I guess, specific to Victoria though. Do you pay the residential rate for water use, or is there a different rate for you?
Yeah, we pay the residential rate for water. That is because it's probably a good question for Virginia. I'm not sure if maybe we could apply for it, but then I think we would have to get maybe the developer to come in as well.
I can kind of chime in a bit if you want, Chris. The thing is that the preferential water rate, it's not offered by cities. Like on South Vancouver Island, it's actually offered by the CRD, the Capital Regional District. And so the subsidy is offered by the CRD, but it's only offered to properties that have BC farm status. And the BC farm status is regulated or obtained through BC assessment. So like for the city of Victoria, for example, for topsoil, if you can get BC farm status, then you'd get preferential water rates from the CRD, and you'd be going through the city of Victoria to obtain that preferential water rate, but you wouldn't be getting the subsidy from the city, you'd be getting it from the CRD. But again, you need to have BC farm status through BC assessment. Hope that helps.
Absolutely, thank you. What else did we got going on here?
I'll also just say, just so people know, we're spending like for a full season, and that's, you know, full on water all overhead. Like I said, we're probably spending about $2,500 on water. So it's not a crazy amount, you know, just to use some water from the city.
Mm-hmm. What, if anything, do you do with your ugly vegetables or ugly greens or undesirable product?
That is a good question. I've never got asked that before. We don't usually have, too much ugly stuff. We really don't have, like, there's very, very, very minimal food waste. We sell most of it through the market or give it to the restaurants. Restaurants love working with, you know, food that obviously it can't be, you know, moldy or anything like that, but they're fine with food that has a few holes in it, and they can, you know, chop it up into stir fries or whatever. We also work with a couple of nonprofits, and we can give some produce to them. I wouldn't say it's ugly produce, but I'd say if it's, you know, a little bit, you know, if we need to get it harvested and we just don't have an outlet right away, we're more than happy to just give it away to those nonprofits. We also aren't growing like tomatoes and peppers and stuff like that usually have the, you know, the end rot and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty easy for us to really sell everything that we have. But if we did, I would say we'd probably just put it on the market stand and like they do in France, and just sell it as ugly vegetables and have it be a little bit cheaper. And I think people would be more than happy to buy it.
Great. Another question here. Sorry, Chris, they're all for you. Do you track environmental, social, and governance metrics at all within your operation?
That is a very good question. We do not at this point. I mean, we'll track, you know, how much CO2 emissions we'll offset with not driving everything or using an electric car, and reduction of plastic packaging. That's something that we would really love to actually work with Fed or Synergy with, because that is their job, and going in and doing all those assessments for businesses. You know, we're doing things, you know, intrinsically farming is kind of a sustainable business. And I would love to work with Synergy to kind of get the actual metrics of really what we're doing. But, you know, just being able to promote, being able to drive it and no chemicals and no plastic packaging, I think is kind of good enough for us right now. Great,
excellent. There's a few questions around your actual, let me see here. There's a few on the chat I just want to pull up. What kind of fridge do you have? Is it portable? And then there was another question asking you to just quickly describe your like wash and pack operation, and whether your crops were conditioned and stored on site or sent anywhere else.
Yeah, so it's all on site. I mean, up until this year, we were harvesting and washing everything on site. And then because we didn't have a fridge, we used, there's a big industrial fridge just a couple of blocks away that Spinnaker owns. So we would use that and just put it in there the night before and then deliver it the next day. Then last year we got just a standard, it's like a pop fridge, like a 2-door sliding glass door pop fridge. That kind of worked out perfectly for us. I mean, we're not having many things. We don't need to store things for days and days and days. I mean, we're harvesting on Tuesday for a Wednesday delivery, so we can harvest everything for the restaurants, put it in there, and then literally the next morning it's out the door, and we have that fridge space back. For the market, pretty much everything gets harvested the morning of. We'll do a little bit the night before just so we can start the day off with some stuff, but we're trying to make things as fresh as possible and as close to being harvested as possible, by the time it reaches your plate. So just kind of, working out again that weekly task management and knowing what we're doing. So we're harvesting on Tuesday and we're delivering on Wednesday, and then everything else is just getting harvested for the market up until Friday. But yeah, I mean, most of the time, if we run out of stuff, it's not like we're harvesting more and putting in the fridge. If we run out of stuff in the market and someone comes down and wants salad greens, we'll just say, yeah, give us 2 minutes. We'll go cut it for you, and just cut it for them and give it to them. So there's not much room for, not much need for a refrigeration unit as you typically would on, let's say, a quote unquote regular farm, when those farms are farther away. So you do want to have a fridge so you can kind of harvest a couple of days before and just kind of have it stored and then be able to transfer it on whatever day your delivery is. So yeah, it's been interesting to start a farm with no fridge. We didn't have electricity till last year, so that's why we just had to kind of make it work. And yeah, I think I guess we did.
Yeah, absolutely. A question probably for both you and Virginie. Maybe Chris, you can speak to how long it took for you. But the question is, how long does it take to go through the full permitting process in Victoria?
That is a good question. I mean, I've gone through so much. I went through everything when there was no permits, and then I've gone through it when there is permits, which is great. I mean, to be honest, and again, Virginie did such a great job in the presentation, and I think the city of Victoria just supporting local food production and urban agriculture. It's 100 times easier than what it was in 2015 when I was just trying to do it and work with the city to go through these processes that weren't really in place right now. But I think now the city has made it super easy. Hey, Virginie?
For some things, yeah, for sure. And I should say that, I was talking about that growing the city consultation process. A lot of what we did was to go to Chris and be like, hey, Chris, how was it for you? What do we need to change? So, Chris's experience was really really informed a lot of the changes that we made. So to the question specifically about how long it can take to obtain a permit, it depends what permit you're talking about. So if you're talking about a business license, that's pretty quick. So anything that will allow you to sell your products on-site or off-site at the farm stand, like that, I feel that within a couple of weeks, you were able to obtain a business license. What is trickier, or could possibly take longer, is if you're talking about a building permit for a structure like a greenhouse, or a walk-in cooler, or anything that's beyond that 10 square meter footprint that I mentioned. That I can't really venture to say how long it would take you. It would totally depend on your project. If it's something that city staff has seen before in the past and it's not that new, that tends to be a lot faster. But if it's a new type of structure that we're not familiar with, it can take longer for sure. So no specific answer for that one. Sorry.
That's fair. Excellent. I've got some more here.
But sorry, I will jump in there and say that the city will give you all the information that you need. So if you do need a permit process, it's really just if you need more aspects to the permit, let's say, architectural drawings to your greenhouse, they'll give you all that information. Then it's up to you to go out and find the architect and make sure that all the specs are good to go, and then you can present that back to the city. So, I mean, all the information's there, right? You just need to go out and get it.
I think that's a good point, Chris. Thanks for mentioning that. I think if people are interested also, I can put some links up for people that attended this presentation that will take you directly to the City of Victoria permits page. And then you'll see all the documents that you can review depending on the type of permit that you are considering applying for. And yeah, city staff is certainly there to help you and assist you throughout the process.
Great. And Chris, there was another question about your rough startup costs for starting TOPSOIL.
Yeah, so that's always a question that gets asked. I spent 2 years, like I said, developing the business, and pretty much the 2 years was trying to convince a building developer to let me put a farm on their rooftop, which was difficult to do when just was making it up as we go. But during that time, what happened was the developer needed to see that we had financing. So I spent about 6 or 7 months trying to convince Van City to give me a $50,000 loan, right? Which was amazing. And, it was a really interesting process to go through because it really made me crunch my numbers on this idea that had never been done before, coming from a person that had never run a business before, just graduated from university. But yeah, I mean, it worked. Like, I took 6 months and I finally convinced them to give me $50,000 as a loan. And I remember I signed the papers in the office, and I walked out, I drove a block down the street, and I stopped, I pulled over, and I just couldn't believe what I just did. I felt so great because I convinced them to give me $50,000, and finally I won. But then I realized, like, oh no, I just took out a $50,000 loan from a bank. This is not a good thing. So I phoned them up immediately and I said, don't process those papers. I do not want to do this. Had someone look at it, they were charging me 10% interest on the 50 grand. Even if I paid back 40 grand of it, they were still charging me 50 until it was all 10% on the 50 so they were really just mitigating their risk. Van City's awesome. I'm still with them. They're amazing. They've done such great stuff. They're super supportive, but that whole process was just super intense for me to go through, because I felt like that was the only way that you can start a business. But when you really look at entrepreneurship or any successful business person, most of them started with no money. They didn't know what they were doing, and they just kind of just started and made it work and bootstrapped it. And that's exactly what we did. So we were able to just kind of get friends and family into the idea because we were able to convince a bank. Now it was kind of easier to get, some people to throw in a bit of money here and there, and did that. So it was definitely less than $50,000 to start up, and just a lot of time and effort and convincing. There's a great book by Damon John. He's one of the sharks on Shark Tank, but it's called The Power of Broke. And it's pretty much like starting a business with having no money. You just have to go out and do it and build relationships and get people on board with your idea and really kind of trade and barter and just put everything into what you have. And that's actually legitimately what we did, or what I did. Was just trying to get it off the ground and just not taking no for an answer and going for it. So yeah, it was less than 50. I would say probably around 30 to get it off the ground and started. But that's also from year one, right? If I started it now, I would have spent way less. I didn't know what I was doing. I was spending money on things that I just didn't need, and so many things that I just bought that, just didn't use or used once, in terms of like tomato cages. It's like, oh, I bought 300 tomato cages and then we don't use tomato cages ever again. So now I still have the tomato cages down at our site. So if anyone wants tomato cages, I will give you some tomato cages.
I might take you up on that. There was one other question for you, Chris, as to whether you ever take short-term volunteers from someone that this particular person lives in Cowichan Bay, and just wondering if you're open to things like that.
Yeah, we always have volunteers down. We get so many emails of people wanting to volunteer, and we always love having volunteers down. There's not that much to do, you know what I mean? Like, we're down there and we're kind of doing what we need, like, as opposed to a normal farm where usually you'd come and they would just say, hey, go weed that whole area there, and you get to volunteer and do it. For us, there really isn't that much work that we need tons of volunteers down. Having said that, you know, everyone who wants to volunteer, we have a big volunteer email list, and every time if we do need extra hands, we'll just send out a big blast email to that list. And then the first, you know, 2 or 3 people that reply, we'll be able to bring them down, and they can help out. But yeah, I mean, our farm definitely does not run off of volunteers. It just runs off of a very core group of people kind of getting what needs to get done. But having said that, if there is opportunities, we're always happy to bring people down.
Great. Asia, I don't want to leave you out here, and I did see a question a while ago about, you spoke about the Young Agrarians and also a program in Quebec. Are there any other organizations that you're aware of, maybe south of the border or other parts of Canada, that do similar work that Young Agrarians does?
Thanks, Brianna. Yeah, there are a few land matching programs in the States. I don't know their names off the top of my head. I'm sure a Google search would do it. Like land matching or land linking is kind of keywords, land leasing. Yeah, there aren't any like partner organizations. Unfortunately, there's no land matching program in Alberta yet either, but maybe that'll be in the works with Young Agrarians in the future. So really for now, the land matching program is the BC program. And then, yeah, there's Arterre, that organization in Quebec that is working on matching farmers. And Quebec is just awesome in terms of new farmer resources and supports.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you. Chris, I do have one more question for you here. One growing question. It is, do you just grow from seed, or do you start anything indoors or in seedlings?
Yeah, so that's a good question. When we started, I knew that we needed a lot of soil to fill up the containers, and I knew we needed plant starts because we didn't have a greenhouse. So we partnered with Refuse, got in touch with the owner there, literally just cold called him and said, hey, we need some soil. Would you be willing to help out? And he was definitely willing to help out and actually become a really good friend. And then CNC Growers, which is a greenhouse just up by Mount Work there, did the same thing, just rocked up to the owner and said, hey, I'm starting this business, you know, can you help us out? And he's become almost a business mentor, a really, really good friend, does a lot of our plant starts for us, which is great. And it allows us to kind of turn those beds really quickly. So when we pull plants, like I was saying before, we can prep that bed, top it with compost, and replant Mizuna and have it be growing and harvesting in, 7 to 10 days, depending on the time of the year. In May, it's super quick. So we're really able to kind of keep that production going throughout the whole season, which allows us to kind of get to that, those numbers. Having said that, though, last year we did start to use a lot more seeds, and seeds are great. Obviously they're cheaper, but they do take a little bit longer to grow. So we're just kind of playing around with that right now. So what we're doing this year is we're starting with the plant starts from CNC Growers, which is great. We're going to be planting on March 23rd, which means that right now they're growing. So we're not losing any time. Once they're in the ground, March 23rd, then we're just going to wait a couple of weeks before we can start harvesting them. And then after that, we're going to seed everything throughout the season. And then at the end of the season in September, we're going to do the same thing, get the plant starts from CNC Growers, just so they're established and we can kind of plant a bit later in the season and not lose that time. So Yeah, I mean, teaming up with a nursery is definitely an amazing thing to do. You don't lose any time, and it's a lot easier to plant starts. You know, they're usually going to take off. With seeds, they're great. Yes, they're cheaper, but you know, sometimes they don't germinate. They definitely take longer before you can harvest them. So you're that square footage is just sitting idle. It's not doing anything for, let's say, a month, and then you know, uncover it and you know, it hasn't done well, and then you don't get the production that you needed out of that. So you know, plant starts are definitely a fail-safe way of, you know, having that production. But there is also benefits to seeds if you can really dial in that kind of germination rate and getting them going at certain times of the year.
Nice. And have you considered yourself having your greenhouse on your property, or are you sort of feeling limited by some of the policy around that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would love to greenhouse the entire site for sure. You know, it means that we definitely have to grow all year round. I like the fact that we get winters off, to be fully honest with you.
Nice.
But I mean, if we did do another site, it would probably have a greenhouse, and we would be able to work with the city to get that permit going, because we have the numbers that would support, you know, the capital, like infrastructure and the capital input of buying a $40,000 greenhouse, you know, and have it be a 20,000 square foot space, which I think would be super cool in the city of Victoria. So we would love to be able to do it. And working with Virginia, I mean, she's amazing, and the city's so great. So yeah, I think we'd like to do it, but right now, yeah, we're happy with how that's growing at Dockside.
Yeah, excellent. One other question, which I'll pose to all of you, seeing if anybody knows the answer. Someone was wondering if any of you are aware of any farming grants for those with registered disabilities. I am not, but if anybody else is.
I don't know of any. I know there's tons of grants out there for local food production. I've tried so hard to get them, but because we're a for-profit business, it's harder for us to get those. But there are tons of farming. There's tons of farming funding out there for anything to do with local food production. So I would say, yeah, just take a look on Google, and yeah, there's, you know, local food production's right place, right time right now if you're looking for some help from the government, if you're running it as a for-profit or a charity.
I think if I can chime in too, like, I think it depends on where you're based. Like, I'm assuming your person asking this question is based in BC. There are some funding. I think to keep in mind is that most of the funding tends to be, the ones that I've seen anyways, tends to be to hire labor. So like it's the government pays a certain percentage of your labor costs. And to the question of registered disabilities, I do think that when they assess your applications, you are at a greater chance of obtaining don't call it really grants, don't really call it subsidies, it's more like support programs. So they do weigh that into when they consider the application. But there is this new program with the BC Ministry of Food, Fisheries and Agriculture. It's called the BC Small Farm Acceleration Pilot Program, I think. It was rolled out this year for the first time, and it's unique in that, like I mentioned, usually in BC, there's not a whole lot of grants for infrastructures. Like, it tends to be more for labor or market planning or farm planning or that kind of stuff. But that specific grant program, you can use it to start your small farm business or to expand an existing small farm business. So I think you have to be making less than $60,000 in gross sales to be eligible. But you can use that money to like buy a hoop house or install a deer fence or anything that would allow you to grow or start a new business. I'm not an expert on this new granting stream, but I just suggest that you check it out, the BC Small Farm Acceleration Pilot Program. The intake period is closed right now, but I think there are good chances that they're going to open it for next year.
Great, thank you. We're getting very close to the end, but I'm going to sneak one more question in for Chris, because I think it's one that might be helpful for people. You had mentioned that you have some other revenue streams for Topsoil. Are you able to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we do lots of consulting. We do education. I'm teaching a course up at UVic about the business of growing food. Yeah, that's pretty much our main two right there. And then we're just doing, odd things on the side there as well.
Great. Okay, 8 o'clock on the dot. This has been so much information. Thank you to everyone for coming. I'm just going to pop up last slide there, just with some more information, websites and such for anybody that wants to find out more or just revisit any of this. As we mentioned in the chat, this was recorded, so we will be hosting it on our website, the Fed website, so www.getfed.ca, and it'll be /Street to Sky, as this was an extension of our Street to Sky project. So it'll all be there. And as I also mentioned, we will be having our guides finalized and sent out to everyone that registered for the workshop in the coming weeks once they are good to go. And they'll also be on our website as well. But yeah, thank you to Asia, Chris, and Virginie so much. Thank you to Ellie and Sina who have helped me with the chat and with the tech stuff. And thank you all for joining. It was a great workshop. I hope you learned something. I know I did a lot. So thank you to everybody for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.